I am sitting in the dark of my living room, staring at the glowing screen of my phone. 66 missed calls. Dozens of frantic text messages lighting up the display one after another, vibrating violently against the glass coffee table. At the other end of those unreturned calls, my sister's multi-million-dollar empire is burning to the ground. Her pristine, carefully curated reputation is in freefall. Her husband is packing his bags in a hotel room. And the entire illusion of our perfect, wealthy family is shattering into a million sharp, jagged pieces. And the craziest part about this whole situation, all of this unprecedented destruction started over a single piece of lobster. Just 3 hours ago, I was standing in a rented luxury ballroom that smelled like expensive perfume, roasted meats, and fake sincerity. It was the annual fundraising gala celebrating my sister Vesper's elite private academy. The room was dripping in unnecessary wealth. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting a warm, golden glow over the evening. A live string quartet played classical music in the corner, and waiters in crisp white tuxedos carried silver trays of champagne through a dense crowd of local politicians, wealthy donors, and minor celebrities. My 10-year-old son, Soren, who had been dragged to this unbearable event because my parents insisted on a show of family unity, was standing near the edge of the room. He was wearing a little navy suit that was slightly too big for him, looking entirely out of place and overwhelmed by the noise. He was hungry. We had been there for 3 exhausting hours, and the main dinner service was delayed because Vesper was busy giving a self-congratulatory speech on the main stage. Soren wandered over to a long catering table covered in elaborate appetizers. He did not know what he was looking at. He just saw a silver tray filled with small, buttered lobster tails resting on a bed of crushed ice, surrounded by tiny delicate lemon wedges. He reached his small hand toward the silver tongs resting next to the bowl. Before his fingers could even brush the cold metal, Vesper's hand shot out from the crowd. She slapped his wrist away hard enough to make a loud smacking sound that made a few nearby guests turn their heads. She did not yell. That was never her style. Instead, she leaned down, maintaining that polished, camera-ready smile she reserves for the people who write her large checks. Her voice was a venomous whisper, loud enough for me and our parents to hear, but quiet enough to keep the wealthy donors entirely oblivious. "Those are for gifted kids, Soren," she sneered, her eyes locking onto his frightened face. "Do not waste them." My son froze. The light drained from his eyes instantly. He pulled his hand back as if he had been burned by fire. He looked down at his shoes, his small shoulders slumping inward. I felt a surge of blinding heat rush to my face. My chest tightened so hard it hurt to breathe. I looked over at my mother, Delphine, expecting her to step in, to say something, anything, to protect her grandson from such a vile, degrading comment. My mother just stared down at her champagne flute, swirling the golden liquid and pretending she had not heard a single word. My father, Alistair, sighed loudly, a sound of pure annoyance. He glanced around nervously to make sure no important investors had witnessed the awkwardness. He stepped toward me, pointed his finger toward the exit, and muttered under his breath. "He can eat fast food later, Marin. Stop letting him make a scene. Your sister is under a lot of pressure tonight." No one defended my boy. Not one single person in that family of blood relatives thought it was wrong to tell a 10-year-old child that he lacked the intelligence to eat a piece of seafood. I did not argue. I did not scream. I did not throw my drink in her perfectly made-up face, even though every fiber of my being wanted to tear her apart right there in front of her precious investors. I just walked over to Soren, grabbed his small, trembling hand, gathered our coats from the coat check, and walked out the heavy glass doors into the cold night air. I could hear my Uncle Ignatius muttering to my parents that I was always acting so dramatic and sensitive, always ruining the mood. They thought I was retreating. They thought I was running away to hide in the shadows, just like I had done my entire life when they pushed me aside. They had no idea that I was not running away. I was walking toward the single button that would blow their entire world apart. The walk through the sprawling parking lot of the country club felt like trying to move underwater. The cold night air hit my face, biting at my cheeks, but I barely felt it. I could still hear the faint, elegant sound of the string quartet playing inside the venue, a sickening, beautiful soundtrack to the ugly reality of what had just happened. My heart was pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I looked down at Soren. He was dragging his feet, his little hand cold and limp inside mine. Just as I clicked the unlock button on my key fob, my Uncle Ignatius came jogging out of the side door. Ignatius is the family's favorite flying monkey. He thrives on the family drama, but always plays the role of the peacekeeper, which in our toxic family dynamics really just means he bullies the victim into apologizing to the aggressor to maintain a false harmony. Marin, seriously? Ignatius called out, waving his arms as he jogged over the damp asphalt. You are doing this right now on the biggest night of her life? You know how stressed Vesper is about the bank closing on Monday. Get back in there before you ruin everything and embarrass your father. You are making a huge deal out of nothing. She just wanted the catering to look nice for the Sterling Foundation people. I did not even look at him. I opened the heavy back door of my SUV, made sure Soren was safely inside, buckled his seatbelt for him, and then slowly turned to face Ignatius. I did not yell. My voice was eerily calm, the kind of dead, flat calm that comes just before a hurricane makes landfall. Go back inside, Ignatius. Go enjoy the lobster. I got into the driver's seat, locked all the doors, and pulled out of the lot, leaving him standing there under a flickering street light with his mouth hanging open in shock. As I drove away from the glowing country club, I looked at the rearview mirror. I watched the building fade into the distance. Where are you watching this video from right now? And what is the weather like there? Drop it in the comments below. I would love to know how far this story is traveling. The ride home was suffocatingly quiet. Soren usually talks nonstop. He has a brilliant, restless, beautiful mind. He struggles with severe dyslexia at school, which means reading a simple paragraph takes him twice as long as the other kids, and his spelling tests are always covered in red ink. Because of this, my family has always treated him like a lost cause, a broken toy they do not know what to do with. They speak to him slowly, loudly, as if he lacks basic comprehension. But what they refuse to see, what they are too blind and arrogant to notice, is that he is a mechanical and digital genius. At 10 years old, he can take apart a malfunctioning laptop, diagnose a fried motherboard issue, and write complex logic code for educational applications. To my sister, he was just a prop that did not look good in her promotional photos. To my parents, he was a massive disappointment because he did not bring home shiny gold stars to brag about at their country club dinners. He sat in the back seat, staring out the window at the passing street lights, blurring into yellow streaks. His small hands were folded tightly in his lap. He had not cried. I wished he would cry. Tears meant a wound was still asking to be seen and healed. Silence meant he was packing it away, finding a dark corner in his soul to store that rejection forever. We were stopped at a long red light when he finally spoke. His voice was incredibly small, fragile, and it cracked on the first word. Mom. Yes, baby. I looked at him in the rearview mirror, my heart breaking into 1,000 pieces. Am I really not a gifted kid? Is that why Grandpa did not want me to eat the food? Am I just stupid? That single sentence broke me. It shattered every carefully constructed excuse I had ever built for my family over the past 3 decades. It stripped away all the rationalization I had used to survive their toxic behavior. I pulled the car over to the side of the dark road, put it in park, unbuckled my seatbelt, and turned around to look him directly in the eyes. Listen to me, Soren, and listen closely, I said, making sure my voice was firm and full of unwavering certainty. You are the smartest, kindest, most brilliant person I have ever known. Some adults are just broken inside. They confuse fancy titles, expensive clothes, and money with actual character. That is their sickness, not your truth. You never have to prove your worth to them again. You are a genius. Do you hear me? He nodded slowly, wiping his nose with the back of his sleeve, but I could see the heavy doubt lingering in his eyes. The damage was already done. You cannot erase years of subtle rejection and a direct cruel insult with one pep talk in a parked car on a Saturday night. Sitting there looking at my sad little boy, my mind opened a museum of pain. Every exhibit was a memory I had tried so desperately to bury for the sake of family peace. I saw my 18th birthday. I had just been accepted into a highly prestigious finance program on a partial scholarship. We were supposed to have a quiet family dinner at my favorite restaurant to celebrate. Instead, Vesper called my parents crying because her wealthy boyfriend had broken up with her. My parents immediately canceled my dinner, bought her a $2,000 designer handbag to cheer her up, and threw an impromptu party for her at our house with her friends. I spent my 18th birthday eating cold leftover pizza alone in my bedroom while they comforted the golden child downstairs. I saw the day I won a National Corporate Award for Advanced Financial Risk Modeling. I brought the heavy glass plaque to my parents' house, hoping for just one moment of genuine validation. My mother, Delphine, glanced at it, said, "That is nice, dear," and then spent the next 45 minutes showing me digital mock-ups of Vesper's new executive office furniture. But the most painful memory, the one that made my blood boil right now, was from 4 years ago. Vesper's Academy was on the brink of total bankruptcy. She had overhired staff, overspent on lavish marketing events, and had zero financial tracking in place. The creditors were circling like vultures. Our parents begged me to step in and save her. I did not sleep for 4 days. For straight nights of chugging black coffee, restructuring crippling debt, negotiating fiercely with angry vendors, and building an airtight financial model from scratch that would save her company. While I was doing that, sacrificing my own health, Vesper checked herself into a luxury wellness retreat in the mountains because the stress was ruining her complexion. I saved her empire. I built the very foundation it stood on today. And the ultimate, sickening irony of tonight? The grand gala, the string quartet, the ice sculptures, and yes, that very tray of lobster tails she slapped my son's hand away from? I paid for it. Vesper's corporate accounts were stretched thin pending a massive bank loan on Monday, so I had quietly put the entire $32,000 catering and venue bill on my personal black card to save her face. My reward was watching her treat my son like a stray dog begging for scraps at a royal banquet. I pulled the car back onto the road and drove the rest of the way home in heavy silence. The sorrow was completely gone. It had burned away, leaving nothing but cold, calculated, terrifying purpose. I was done being the invisible foundation. It was time to pull the support beams and let the whole arrogant structure collapse on top of them. By the time we walked through the front door of our apartment, the leftover adrenaline in my system was making my hands shake slightly. I helped Soren out of his oversized suit, made him a plate of warm macaroni and cheese, the kind he actually liked, and sat with him at the kitchen table while he ate. He seemed a little brighter, showing me a new notebook sketch he was working on. It was a wireframe diagram for a digital reading game he was trying to program himself. I praised his logic, kissed his forehead, and tucked him into bed. I sat in his dark room for a long time, listening until his breathing steadied, and he fell into a deep sleep. Then I walked down the hallway into my home office and locked the heavy wooden door firmly behind me. The glowing screen of my computer monitor illuminated the dark room. It was time to go to work. I went straight to the small fireproof safe hidden in the bottom drawer of my filing cabinet. I punched in the 6-digit code. The heavy metal door clicked open and I reached inside, pulling out a thick, legal-sized manila envelope. Inside was the master operating agreement for Vesper's Elite Academy. Most people in Vesper's pretentious circle thought I was just a minority investor, a helpful little sister who threw in some seed cash early on and stayed out of the way. Even Vesper, in her immense, blinding arrogance, had convinced herself over the years that because she was the CEO, the one taking all the meetings and giving all the speeches, she held all the actual power. She treated our corporate structure like an annoying piece of paperwork she just had to sign once. But I am a senior financial risk manager. I calculate disaster for a living. I do not gamble, and I certainly do not gamble with my own money on someone who prioritizes aesthetics and country club memberships over actual profit margins. When I bailed her out 4 years ago, I did not just hand over a check and walk away. I formed a quiet shell holding company. Through that specific entity, I acquired exactly 60% of the voting shares in her academy. I held the absolute veto power over any major financial decision, any executive compensation package, and most importantly, any new debt acquisition. I was the ghost in her machine. My phone vibrated violently against the wood of my desk. The sudden noise made me jump. It was a text message from Vesper. I opened it and read the words, my jaw clenching so hard my teeth ached. You completely ruined the mood at the sponsor table. Dad had to spend 20 minutes covering for your little emotional tantrum. Do not bring your personal feelings into business. Be at the bank branch at 9 in the morning sharp on Monday to sign the guarantee for the $3 million expansion loan. And please wear something professional for once in your life. We have the Sterling Foundation executives watching us closely. I stared at the glowing screen, reading the words over and over. She was demanding that I personally guarantee a massive $3 million construction loan that would put my own financial future at risk for her new branches, while simultaneously insulting my clothes and acting as if humiliating my son was just a minor inconvenience to her evening. She was so blinded by her own narcissism that she truly believed I was trapped in my role. She thought I was so desperate for our parents' sparse approval that I would just swallow my anger, show up on Monday morning, sign away my financial safety net, and continue letting her reign as the queen of the family. She thought I would just take the abuse. She was wrong. The era of unconditional silent support ended the exact second she laid a hand on my son. I looked at the digital clock on my monitor. It was 11:30 at night. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I knew by heart. Tamsin answered on the third ring. Tamsin is my corporate attorney. She is brilliant, ruthless in a courtroom, and has never hidden her deep, seething distaste for my sister's flashy, hollow business tactics. She had spent years watching me bend over backward to accommodate my family's demands, quietly waiting for the day I would finally snap and let her do her job. Tell me someone is going to jail, Tamsin said, her voice gravelly and thick with sleep. Because if no one is going to jail, calling your lawyer at almost midnight on a Saturday better involve a hostile corporate takeover. Nobody is in jail yet, Tamsin, I said, my voice steady and cold as ice. But my sister is about to have a very, very bad Monday morning. I am done. I heard rustling on the other end of the line as she sat up in bed. The sleepiness vanished from her tone instantly, replaced by a sharp, predatory focus. I am listening. Tell me what we are doing. I need you to draft an official legal notice to the commercial lending division at the bank. We are pulling my personal guarantee on the $3 million expansion loan. I want it done immediately. Tamsin let out a low, impressed whistle. Marin, if you pull the guarantee right now, less than 48 hours before the scheduled closing, the bank will immediately freeze the entire credit line. The expansion will die on the vine. Vesper will default on all the contractor deposits she has already made. She will be financially stranded. Your parents are going to declare a holy war against you. Let them, I said, looking over at the operating agreement spread across my desk, tracing the lines of my 60% ownership with my index finger. Also, I want to trigger Section 8.4 of the operating agreement. I am officially suspecting severe financial mismanagement. I want a full independent forensic audit of the last 3 years of operating expenses. Send the formal notice to the board of directors tonight. And Tamsin? Yes. Freeze all executive spending accounts. Lock her company credit cards. Revoke her signature authority on the main operating accounts. There was a long, heavy silence on the phone. Then Tamsin laughed softly. It was the terrifying sound of a shark smelling blood in the water. I have been waiting 4 long years for you to make this call, Tamsin said. I will have the filings drafted and sent to the bank executive's emergency email contacts within the hour. By tomorrow morning, your sister will not be able to buy a cup of coffee with company money. Have a good night, Marin. Thank you, Tamsin. Good night. I hung up the phone. I sat in the quiet of my home office, the blue light from the monitor casting long shadows against the wall. I did not feel guilty. I did not feel scared. I did not feel the usual crushing anxiety of disappointing my family. I felt a profound, crystal-clear sense of liberation. The dominoes were officially in motion. Sunday morning broke with a dull gray sky. The kind of overcast, heavy weather that perfectly matched the impending storm I had just unleashed on my family. I woke up early, made a large stack of chocolate chip pancakes for Soren, and acted like it was just another normal, lazy weekend. We sat on the couch in our pajamas and watched his favorite cartoons. We talked about the mechanics of the new video game he wanted to play. I deliberately did not check my work phone. I left it sitting on the kitchen granite counter, face down, entirely silent. At exactly 9 in the morning, the digital storm made landfall. First, my personal phone started vibrating violently against the coffee table. Then, my work phone in the kitchen started ringing loudly. A few minutes later, the old landline in the apartment, a number literally nobody ever calls, began to chime shrilly. It was a perfectly synchronized, desperate assault of panic from people who had just realized the floor had vanished beneath their feet. I poured myself a large cup of black coffee, walked over to the kitchen counter, and simply watched the screens light up. Vesper. Dad. Mom. Uncle Ignatius. Vesper again. An unknown number. Vesper's husband, Lachlan. Dad again. I let every single one of them ring out. I watched the missed call counter climb steadily. 10. 25. 40. By 11 in the morning, the notification bubble on my screen proudly displayed 66 missed calls. They had received Tamsin's emails. The banking executives had officially notified Vesper that the loan closing was canceled indefinitely due to the sudden withdrawal of the primary guarantor. The minority board members had received the formal legal notice of the emergency forensic audit and the immediate freezing of the CEO's discretionary spending power. Vesper had woken up that morning thinking she was a titan of industry about to secure $3 million to expand her kingdom. She was now a restricted employee under active investigation, unable to even pay for her own expensive Sunday brunch on the company dime. Finally, after finishing my coffee, I picked up my phone and tapped my father's contact name. He answered before the first ring even finished. "Marin, what the hell is wrong with you?" Alistair bellowed into the receiver, his voice cracking with pure rage. The background noise on his end was total chaos. I could hear my mother sobbing hysterically in the distance and Vesper screaming at someone, probably her poor assistant, on another phone line. "Good morning, Dad," I said calmly, leaning against the cold granite counter. "Do not say good morning to me." Vesper's corporate credit cards just got declined in front of everyone at the Sunday brunch club. The senior bank executive called her in an absolute panic. "They said you pulled the guarantee and ordered a forensic audit. Tell me this is a mistake. Tell me your lawyer sent the wrong form." "It was not a mistake. It was a direct order," I replied, my voice steady. "I am the majority shareholder, Dad. I have a legal fiduciary duty to investigate financial irregularities when I see them." "Irregularities? You are doing this because of a stupid party. Because she corrected your kid." He was breathless with rage, unable to comprehend that I was actually fighting back. "You are acting like a jealous, spiteful teenager. You are trying to ruin her business over a piece of seafood." "It was lobster, Dad." And she did not correct him. She humiliated him. She told a 10-year-old boy he had no value, that he wasn't gifted enough to eat. She was stressed out. He yelled, relying on the family's favorite, worn-out excuse for her terrible behavior. "She is carrying the massive weight of a huge corporation. You cannot sabotage a $3 million deal because your feelings got hurt. Fix this right now. Call the bank. You are making your sister look pathetic in front of her investors." I looked out the window at the quiet street below. The burning anger in my chest from the night before was gone, replaced by a massive wall of solid ice. "No, Dad," I replied, my voice dropping an octave, becoming dead serious. "I did not make her look pathetic. I just stopped making her look wealthy. Her entire empire is built on my credit. If she is truly the brilliant visionary you all constantly claim she is, she can secure the loan on her own merit, with her own collateral." There was a heavy, suffocating silence on the other end of the line. He knew just as well as I did that Vesper had absolutely no collateral. She spent everything she earned on luxury cars, designer clothes, and maintaining an exhausting image of extreme wealth. She lived paycheck to paycheck on a CEO salary. Her life was a house of cards, and I had just turned on a giant fan. "You are destroying this family," Alistair said, his voice turning low, bitter, and threatening. "If you do not reverse this by tomorrow morning, you are dead to us. Do you understand me? Dead." "I understand perfectly," I said, feeling lighter than I had in years. "Enjoy the country club." I hung up the phone and immediately blocked his number. I blocked my mother's number. I blocked Uncle Ignatius. I did not block Vesper. I wanted to see what she would do next. I did not have to wait long. She did not text me to apologize. She did not call to beg. She did exactly what every cornered narcissist does when their power is threatened. She ran to the court of public opinion. She decided that if she could not control my money anymore, she would control the narrative. But in her blind panic to play the victim, she made a fatal mistake that would hand me the exact ammunition I needed to bury her permanently. By 2 in the afternoon, my phone started buzzing relentlessly with screenshots forwarded by distant cousins and old family friends. Vesper had gone on to her private social media accounts and into the large family group chat to launch her desperate smear campaign. The main post was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive victimhood. It featured a black and white photograph of her looking exhausted but supposedly brave, sitting behind her grand mahogany desk, rubbing her temples. The caption read, "Heartbroken today." It is truly devastating when the people you try to uplift turn against you. I have spent my entire adult life building this academy to help children succeed, only to face a hostile, unprovoked attack from within my own family. My sister, who has always struggled with deep-seated jealousy, is using her disabled child as an excuse to illegally seize control of my company. I ask for your prayers during this dark time as I fight tooth and nail to protect my vision and my employees. She actually called Soren disabled. She weaponized his learning difference to garner cheap sympathy from her followers, painting me as an unstable, jealous woman having a manic episode. The family chat exploded with activity. Aunts and uncles, who had not spoken to me in 5 years, were suddenly leaving me long voicemails, calling me a monster. I did not respond to a single one of them. Let them talk. Words on a social media post do not hold up in a court of law. Financial documents do. While the extended family was busy sharpening their pitchforks and lighting their torches, I received a secure text message from a number I did not immediately recognize. "Marin, this is Una, Vesper's executive assistant. Can we please talk? Please do not tell her I contacted you. She is having IT wipe the servers right now. I am scared. If you have watched the story up to this point, please leave a comment saying, 'I'm Win.' That is our secret code for everyone who has made it this far, and I will drop a heart and reply to every single comment with that keyword. Thank you for sticking with me." Una was a young, nervous woman in her 20s who basically lived in Vesper's massive shadow. I knew Vesper treated her terribly, making her pick up dry cleaning, fetch coffee, and work 80-hour weeks on a meager salary. Sometimes Una had even joined in on making subtle, passive-aggressive comments about Soren just to appease her boss and keep her job. She was not exactly my favorite person in the world, but desperation makes strange bedfellows. I replied quickly to her text. "Meet me at the Greasy Spoon Diner on 4th Street in 20 minutes. Come alone." When I arrived at the old diner, the smell of stale coffee and fried food hitting my nose, Una was already sitting in a back corner booth. She looked like she was about to vomit. Her skin was incredibly pale, her hands were shaking, and she was clutching a heavy black external hard drive to her chest like a life preserver in a stormy ocean. I slid into the cracked vinyl booth across from her and ordered 2 black coffees from the tired waitress. "Talk to me, Una. What is going on over there?" I asked, keeping my voice low. She looked around nervously, terrified someone from the academy was watching us. "She is going completely crazy, Marin. When the bank emailed about the audit this morning, she locked herself in her office. She called the IT guy and told him to start wiping the main servers. She said it was a routine security sweep, but we all knew it wasn't. Then, she called me in." Una swallowed hard, her eyes starting toward the door. "She told me to take 3 years of vendor invoices, the physical copies from the filing cabinets, and put them through the industrial shredder in the basement." I leaned forward, my pulse quickening. Did you? No. Una whispered frantically, tears welling up in her eyes. I am not going to federal prison for her. I refused. She yelled at me, called me stupid, said I was lucky to even have a job in this economy. She said if I did not do it, she would ruin my career and make sure I never worked in this city again. But she paused, taking a shaky breath, slowly lowering the black hard drive onto the sticky diner table. But I have been making secret backups of the master server every Friday night for a year. I know things do not add up. I see the expense reports she forces me to file. I see the weird vendors. I see the money moving around. She pushed the heavy black hard drive across the table toward me. Everything is on here, Una said, her voice shaking violently. The real ledgers, the unedited emails, the scholarship fund transfers, all of it. Please just keep my name out of it until the lawyers get involved. I just want out of that toxic place. I placed my hand firmly over the cold metal of the hard drive. This was it. This was the smoking gun I needed to ensure Vesper could never talk her way out of this. You did the right thing, Una, I said softly, feeling a brief moment of genuine pity for her. I will make sure Tamsin protects you legally as a whistleblower. Do not go back to the office tomorrow. Call in sick. Turn off your phone. Let me handle the rest. I drove home with the hard drive sitting on the passenger seat of my car like a ticking time bomb. Vesper was sitting at home, busy typing out fake inspirational quotes and crying to our mother about my alleged jealousy. She thought she was winning the public relations war. She did not realize I had just captured the entire battlefield without firing a single shot. I practically ran into my apartment, locked the door, and went straight to my home office. I plugged Una's hard drive into my laptop and immediately granted remote access to Gideon. Gideon is an independent forensic auditor my lawyer, Tamsin, had hired on retainer. Gideon is a man who speaks entirely in spreadsheets, data points, and risk algorithms. He has no emotions, only formulas. He is terrifyingly efficient, and he was exactly what I needed to dissect my sister's web of lies. For the next 2 hours, we sat on a secure, encrypted video call, diving deep into the dark, rotten underbelly of Vesper's Academy. At first, it was just standard corporate gluttony. Disgusting, but predictable for someone obsessed with image. She has been heavily expensing her personal life, Gideon noted dryly, highlighting rows of data on my screen. His voice was a flat monotone. I see $32,000 paid to a luxury event planner for a private dinner party at her personal residence. $15,000 on personal styling and designer wardrobe classified under brand ambassador apparel. Another $10,000 on spa retreats labeled as executive wellness. Flag it all, I said, rubbing my temples. It was gross, but I expected it. It was exactly how she had bankrupted herself the first time. Then we hit the restricted accounts. The Academy had a charitable arm, a scholarship fund meant to bring underprivileged kids into the leadership programs. It was the centerpiece of Vesper's public relations strategy, the thing she bragged about most to local politicians and investors. It was how she maintained her saint-like image in the community. Gideon's cursor suddenly stopped moving on the screen. He went quiet for a long moment. Marin, Gideon said, his voice tightening slightly, breaking his usual monotone delivery. You need to see this right now. It is much worse than we thought. What is it? I leaned closer to the monitor. I am looking at a transfer of $350,000 directly from the Restricted Charity Scholarship Fund. It was routed through a fake vendor shell account yesterday afternoon. My stomach dropped into my shoes. A cold sweat broke out on my neck. Wait, what? Where did the money go? Gideon opened a scanned document attached to the ledger. It went directly to the Platinum Horizon Yacht Club to secure a lifetime VIP family membership for Vesper and Lachlan. She stole from charity to buy a yacht club membership? I whispered, feeling physically sick. Yes, Gideon replied. But that is not the worst part, Marin. To move money out of a restricted charity account, the bank requires dual authorization from the board. Look at the signature line on this release form. He zoomed in on the document. There, at the bottom of the page, authorizing the theft of $350,000 from poor children, was my signature. She forged my name, I said, all the air leaving my lungs. She didn't just steal, Gideon said, his voice grim. She committed federal wire fraud and identity theft, and she framed you for it. If the bank had processed that $3 million loan on Monday, she probably would have used a chunk of it to quietly replenish this charity account before the annual audit. You pulling the guarantee just trapped her. Document it, I said, my voice barely a whisper, a terrifying rage building in my chest. Document everything. Build the case. I thought that was the bottom. I thought forging my name to steal from charity was the most evil thing my sister was capable of. But I was wrong. The final discovery, the one that would turn my cold anger into a blazing, uncontrollable inferno, was waiting in a hidden folder labeled Grand Initiatives. And it had nothing to do with money. It had to do with my son. Gideon clicked open the folder labeled Grand Initiatives. Inside was a massive submission packet for a major educational innovation grant. $3 million funded by the prestigious Sterling Foundation. The final presentation was scheduled for next week. I frowned, leaning closer to the monitor. I did not know about any grant submission. What is the project? I asked, my voice tight. Gideon opened the primary submission document. It is a proprietary digital learning application designed specifically for children with severe reading comprehension issues. It uses interactive wireframes to gamify phonetic spelling and logic. My blood ran completely cold. All the air left my lungs in a sudden, violent rush. Scroll down, I demanded, my hands gripping the edge of the desk so hard my knuckles turned white. Show me the interface design. Gideon scrolled to the technical appendix. There, plastered on the screen with my sister's corporate watermark stamped all over it, were the exact wireframes, the exact character designs, and the exact coding structures that Soren had been building at our kitchen table for the past 8 months. I remembered it so vividly. 6 months ago, Vesper had stopped by my apartment unannounced to drop off some meaningless tax paperwork. Soren, always eager for any scrap of attention or validation from his aunt, had proudly shown her his computer screen. He had explained how the game worked, how the visual cues helped him read better despite his dyslexia. She had actually smiled. She praised him. She took pictures of his screen with her phone, saying she wanted to show a friend who was a software engineer to get him some tips. I had foolishly thought she was finally being a good, supportive aunt. I had let my guard down because I wanted so desperately for my son to have a normal family. Instead, she was stealing his intellectual property. She had taken the hard work of the very child she constantly called stupid and worthless at family dinners, slapped her own name on it as the lead developer and visionary, and used his genius to try and secure a $3 million grant for her own failing company. I could not breathe. The sheer, unadulterated evil of it was paralyzing. She did not just hate him. She fed off him. She consumed his brilliance, stole his ideas, and spat out his humanity. Who is listed as the creator on that application? I asked, my voice cracking with a suppressed, violent rage. Vesper is listed as the sole creator and lead programmer, Gideon read aloud, his flat voice finally carrying a trace of genuine disgust. There is a small footnote at the bottom that says the prototype was tested on a, quote, learning disabled test subject in a pilot exercise. There is no name attached. She erased him. She stole his mind, stole his hard work, and erased his very name from existence, reducing my brilliant boy to a nameless disabled test subject. I closed my laptop with a loud snap. I stood up, my legs shaking, and walked into the bathroom. I gripped the cold porcelain edges of the sink and stared at my own pale reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back at me was no longer a peacekeeper. She was no longer a silent financial backer. I was not going to just fire her anymore. I was not going to just take the company back and let her walk away to start over somewhere else. I was going to strip her of her fake title, her stolen reputation, her ill-gotten wealth, and her dignity. I was going to make sure that every single person who thought she was a genius knew exactly what kind of monster she truly was. The emergency board meeting was scheduled for the next morning. I was going to bring the fire, and I was going to burn her world to ashes. But how exactly does someone dismantle an entire empire in front of the people who built it? The official emergency board meeting was scheduled for 10 in the morning on Monday. But I did not host it at the corporate offices of the academy, nor did I host it at Tamsin's sterile downtown law firm. Instead, using my authority as the majority shareholder, I formally changed the venue at the very last minute. I moved the meeting to the grand dining room of my parents' house. There was a bitter, poetic irony in this choice. This was the exact room where, for 36 years, I had been systematically diminished. This was the room where my achievements were ignored over Sunday dinners, where Vesper was endlessly praised, and where Soren was subtly treated like a burden. It was the absolute heart of the family's toxic dynamic. It felt only right that the empire built on my silent suffering should be dismantled on the very same mahogany hardwood floor. I arrived at 9:30 with Tamsin and Gideon. My parents were furious, sputtering about the intrusion, but they were too intimidated by Tamsin's cold, professional demeanor to cause a massive scene. Gideon immediately went to work. He did not ask for permission. He simply moved my mother's expensive crystal vase off the center of the long dining table, set up his laptop, and pointed a high-definition projector right at the pristine white wall where my parents proudly hung all of Vesper's fake corporate awards. At exactly 10, the front door opened. Vesper walked in, and the sheer audacity of her appearance almost made me laugh out loud. She was dressed in a $4,000 pristine white designer suit, her hair perfectly blown out, carrying a crocodile skin briefcase that I knew for a fact was purchased with stolen company funds. She looked like she was arriving at a photo shoot for a business magazine, not a disciplinary hearing for federal fraud. Trailing behind her was Lachlan, her husband, and the supposed chief operating officer of her company. Lachlan was a handsome, empty suit who spent most of his time playing golf with donors. He looked nervous, sweating slightly in his polo shirt. My parents immediately rushed to Vesper's side, treating her like a wounded martyr. My father pulled out a chair for her at the head of the table. "This is entirely ridiculous, Marin," Vesper said, crossing her legs and refusing to look at me. She directed her words to Tamsin instead. "My sister is having a documented emotional breakdown. She is jeopardizing a $3 million deal because she lacks the mental fortitude for high-level business. I want this illegal suspension lifted immediately, or I am suing her for tortious interference." Tamsin did not even blink. She slowly opened her leather portfolio. "Good morning, Vesper. For the record, this meeting is being recorded. As the representative of the majority shareholder, my client has the legal right to call this audit review. You are currently suspended from all executive duties pending the results of this presentation." "She is just jealous," my mother, Delphine, blurted out, her voice trembling with misplaced righteous anger. "She has always been jealous of your success, sweetheart. We all know it. This is just a pathetic tantrum over a piece of catering." I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the mahogany table. I looked directly into Vesper's eyes. For the first time in my life, I did not see a superior, untouchable queen. I saw a terrified, cornered animal hiding behind expensive makeup. "This has nothing to do with jealousy, Mom," I said softly, my voice carrying a lethal, echoing calm. "This has to do with theft. Gideon, please share the first slide." Gideon hit a button on his laptop. The projector illuminated the wall, covering Vesper's framed awards with a massive, glaring spreadsheet. The room went dead silent. The numbers were undeniable, written in stark black and white. "Let us begin with the general operating ledger," Gideon said, his voice entirely devoid of emotion. "Over the past 24 months, the chief executive officer has diverted approximately $180,000 from the corporate marketing budget into personal undocumented expenditures. These include $32,000 to a luxury event planner, $15,000 in personal styling, and $40,000 paid to a ghost consulting firm that is registered to a post office box owned by the CEO's personal fitness trainer." My father's face turned a deep, unhealthy shade of red. "Now hold on a second. Successful executives have to maintain a certain image. It is called brand building. You cannot fault her for looking the part." "Image is one thing, Alistair," Tamsin interrupted, her tone sharp enough to cut glass. Embezzling corporate funds through fake vendors is federal wire fraud. But that is just the appetizer. Let us move to the restricted charity accounts. Gideon clicked the mouse. The screen changed to the banking records of the scholarship fund. He detailed the wire transfer of $350,000 to the Platinum Horizon Yacht Club and then displayed the forged authorization form bearing my signature. Lachlan choked on his own saliva. He turned to his wife, his eyes wide with absolute horror. Vesper, you told me that membership was gifted to us by a corporate sponsor. Vesper's pristine white suit suddenly seemed too tight for her. She swallowed hard, her polished smile finally cracking. It was an administrative error, she stammered, looking at Lachlan, then at our father. My assistant, Una. She is an idiot. She must have used the wrong routing number. That is a fascinating defense, I said, sliding a printed piece of paper across the table toward her. Because Una did not forge my signature to bypass the bank security. You did. And forgery is a felony. My father stood up so fast his chair scraped violently against the hardwood floor. Marin, stop this right now. We can handle this privately. We do not need lawyers and auditors airing family mistakes. Mistakes? I laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. Stealing from poor kids so she can drink martinis on a yacht is not a mistake, Dad. It is a crime. But the real shock was yet to come. You have to pause this investigation, my mother pleaded, tears streaming down her face, ruining her makeup. If this gets out, her reputation will be ruined. Please, Marin, you have plenty of money. Just cover the deficit. We can restructure the debt quietly. I froze. I looked at my mother. Cover the deficit? I repeated the words, tasting like ash in my mouth. How did you know there was a deficit, Mom? Gideon just uncovered it last night. I did not mention the amount to Dad on the phone yesterday. My mother covered her mouth with her hand, realizing her fatal mistake. My father looked away, staring at the floorboards. The truth hit me like a physical blow to the chest. You knew, I whispered, the betrayal burning a hole straight through my heart. You knew she was stealing from the company. She came to us 6 months ago, my father muttered defensively. The lifestyle costs were too high. We gave her $100,000 from our retirement savings to float her, but it was not enough. That is why the bank loan today was so important. It was going to save her. And you let her force me to sign a personal guarantee for $3 million? I screamed, slamming my hands on the mahogany table. You were willing to let me go bankrupt to protect her fake image. You are stronger than her, Marin. My mother cried out. You always bounce back. She is fragile. She is not fragile, Tamsin interjected. She is a predator. And speaking of predators, let us move to the real estate disclosures. Lachlan, 2 months ago, your wife took out a second mortgage on your primary residence in the amount of $400,000. She funneled that money to falsely inflate her revenue numbers. Lachlan looked like he had been shot. That is impossible. The house is in both of our names. The bank would require my signature and a notary. Tamsin slid a document across the table. I suggest you look at the signature line, Lachlan. Because according to this, you did sign it, right next to a notary stamp from a woman who happens to be Vesper's personal friend. Lachlan stared at his own forged signature. His hands started to shake violently. You forged my name? He whispered. You mortgaged our house behind my back? I did it for us. Vesper shrieked, the polished facade finally shattering entirely. I had to project success to attract success. You are insane, Lachlan said, standing up and backing away from the table. I am calling a divorce attorney. He did not look at my parents. He did not look at me. He just turned around and walked out the front door, leaving it wide open behind him. Vesper watched him leave, her chest heaving. Then she turned her venomous eyes back to me. Fine. She spat. So I moved some money around. I am the CEO. You can fire me, Marin. But if you do, the Sterling Foundation will pull the $3 million grant. Without me and my genius app, this company is worthless. You need me to secure that money. Will she actually get away with this final claim to brilliance? Speaking of the Sterling Foundation grant, I said, my voice dropping to a deadly whisper. Let us talk about your so-called genius. Gideon tapped his keyboard and the projector screen shifted one last time. The massive wall of my parents' dining room was now filled with the technical wireframes, the bright cartoon graphics, and the complex coding structure of the digital learning application. "This is the proprietary software you submitted to the grant committee, correct?" I asked Vesper. Vesper lifted her chin, trying to salvage some shred of authority. "Yes. It is a revolutionary phonetic gamification app. I spent the last 8 months developing it." The board loved it. "You spent 8 months developing it," I repeated slowly, letting the lie hang in the heavy air. "That is fascinating considering you do not know how to write a single line of code." "Gideon, please zoom in on the source code in the developer appendix. Line 412. The spreadsheet vanished, replaced by lines of dense, colorful coding text. Gideon zoomed in until the letters were massive. "Read it," I commanded her. Vesper squinted at the wall. "It is just code. I hired a freelancer to polish my concepts. I do not see what this proves." "Read the hidden developer note, Vesper. The one embedded in the core structure that you were too lazy to scrub out." She stared at the screen. Her lips moved silently as she read the small line of green text buried deep in the code. I watched the remaining blood drain completely from her face. My father leaned forward, squinting through his reading glasses. "What does it say?" "I cannot read that computer nonsense." "I will read it for you," I said, my voice thick with emotion. I pointed at the wall. "It says //, dedicated to Mom Marin for helping me spell. Version 1.0 by Soren." The silence in the room was absolute. It was so quiet you could hear the hum of the projector fan. "You stole it," I said, tears of pure rage finally stinging my eyes. "You stole a 10-year-old boy's project. A boy you constantly belittled. A boy you called stupid. A boy you told on Saturday did not have the value to eat your precious lobster. You stole his mind. You erased his name. And you used his brilliance to try and secure a $3 million grant for yourself." My mother gasped, finally grasping the true depth of the depravity. "Vesper, tell me this is a mistake. Tell me you did not steal from your own nephew." Vesper slammed her hands on the table, her eyes wild, cornered, and desperate. "It was raw material. It was a child's messy computer game. I took it and I refined it. I gave it a market value. Do you really think a prestigious foundation is going to hand $3 million to a dyslexic 10-year-old? Nobody is going to care who wrote the base code." "I care." A new voice echoed from the hallway. Everyone at the table jumped. We all turned toward the open front door. Standing in the foyer, wearing a sharp tailored suit and an expression of pure, unadulterated disgust, was Zinnia. Zinnia was the wealthy VIP guest from the gala, the one my father was so worried about offending. She was also the chairwoman of the board for the Sterling Foundation. I had asked Tamsin to invite her to this meeting as an interested third-party observer. Zinnia walked slowly into the dining room, her heels clicking sharply against the hardwood floor. She stopped at the edge of the table, looking down at Vesper as if she were a cockroach. "Miss Vesper," Zinnia said, her voice dripping with aristocratic disdain. "When your lawyer invited me here this morning, I was annoyed. Now I am horrified. The Sterling Foundation funds integrity, innovation, and the future of education. We do not fund plagiarism, and we certainly do not fund women who abuse children to steal their intellectual property." Vesper stood up, her hands shaking, trying to put her polished mask back on. "Zinnia, please. You lack the full context. This is a family dispute. My sister is trying to sabotage me." "Save your breath." Zinnia cut her off sharply. "I was at the gala on Saturday. I saw what you did to that little boy at the catering table. I thought it was just poor character. I did not realize it was the behavior of a thief. As of this exact moment, your academy is permanently disqualified from the grant process. Furthermore, I will be making personal phone calls to every major donor in our network by noon today. You will never see another dime of philanthropic money in this city." Zinnia turned to me. Her expression softened significantly. "Marin, you have a brilliant son. Nurture him. Keep him far away from these people." She turned on her heel and walked out of the house. The sound of Zinnia's car driving away signaled the official death of my sister's empire. The loan was dead. The grant was dead. The donors were gone. Tamsin, I said, standing up and closing my laptop. Execute the termination clause. Terminate the CEO for gross misconduct and criminal fraud. Freeze all her remaining shares. Prepare the evidence for the federal authorities regarding the wire fraud and the forged mortgage. I looked at my parents, who were sitting in stunned, horrified silence. You wanted to protect her image so badly, I said softly. Well, take a good look. This is what she really is. I walked out of that dining room, leaving them sitting in the ruins of their own making. The aftermath of that Monday morning board meeting was not a slow decline. It was a brutal, instantaneous execution. By Tuesday morning, Vesper was officially locked out of her own corporate headquarters. Her key card was deactivated, her corporate email was shut down, and building security had instructions to escort her off the premises if she tried to enter. Lachlan did not just threaten divorce. He executed it with terrifying speed. He hired a ruthless shark of an attorney who immediately filed an emergency injunction to freeze all of their remaining personal assets due to the forged mortgage documents. Vesper was forced to pack a single suitcase and move into a cheap, extended-stay motel on the outskirts of the city because her credit cards were either maxed out or frozen by the fraud investigation. In less than 48 hours, the golden child went from standing under a crystal chandelier accepting praise to sitting alone in a motel room eating vending machine food, waiting for the FBI to knock on her door. 3 days after the blowout, I was sitting in my apartment reviewing severance packages when my intercom buzzed. It was the front desk concierge. Miss Marin, your parents are here. They're asking to come up. I sighed, rubbing my tired eyes. Send them up. A few minutes later, Alistair and Delphine stood in my doorway. They looked 10 years older. The arrogant country club shine had been completely stripped away, replaced by the nervous, hunched posture of people who realize they bet their entire lives on the wrong horse. My mother was holding a large white bakery box tied with a red ribbon. Hi, honey, Delphine said, offering a weak, trembling smile. We brought that expensive imported chocolate cake you used to like when you were a teenager. Can we come in? I looked at the cake box. The sheer irony of it was staggering. They were still trying to use expensive food to paper over deep structural abuse. You can come in, I said, stepping aside, but leave the cake in the hallway. Soren and I do not need it. They stepped into my living room, looking around nervously. Alistair cleared his throat, twisting his expensive watch around his wrist. Marin, my father started, his voice lacking its usual booming authority. We wanted to talk. The family is in shambles. Vesper is in a motel. She is facing federal charges. Do you not think this has gone far enough? You proved your point. You won. Can you please just drop the fraud charges? Let her walk away. We are a family. I stood by the kitchen island, crossing my arms. I did not press the fraud charges, Dad. The bank pressed the fraud charges because she committed a federal crime. I cannot magically make the FBI disappear because you feel bad that your favorite daughter is facing the consequences of her own actions. I should have spoken up at the gala, Delphine cried, tears spilling over her cheeks. When she said that awful thing to Soren about the lobster, I should have defended him. I am so sorry, Marin. I was just so caught up in the stress of the evening. You were not caught up in the stress, Mom, I replied, my voice steady and cold. You were caught up in the illusion. You watched her abuse my son, and you chose silence because her fake success was more important to you than his actual humanity. You both knew she was stealing, and you let her try to ruin me to cover it up. He is blood. Alistair yelled, a brief flash of his old temper returning. She is your sister. She is blood. I looked at my father, feeling nothing but profound pity. Soren is blood too, Dad. But you stood in that ballroom and watched him bleed. You told him to go eat fast food. You chose your blood. I chose mine. I walked over to the front door and opened it. You will never mention her name in this house. You will never ask me for money, and you will respect my son, or you will never see him again. Take it or leave it. They stood there for a long moment. Then, defeated and broken, they walked out into the hallway, past the abandoned cake box, and disappeared into the elevator. A month passed before I heard directly from Vesper. I was sitting in my new office, sorting through the massive pile of legal paperwork required to restructure a corrupt corporation. My computer pinged with a new email notification. The subject line read, "From Vesper. Please read." I clicked it open. "Marin, I am writing this from a cheap motel room because Lachlan's lawyers have locked me out of my own life. I hope you are happy with what you have accomplished. You took my company, my husband, and my reputation. I am sorry if Soren misunderstood my comment at the party. It was a high-stress environment. You always were too sensitive about him. I am also sorry that the financial situation got out of hand. But you have to understand the pressure I was under to perform for our parents and the investors. I did what I had to do to keep the dream alive. I need a loan to pay for a criminal defense attorney. Just $50,000. Consider it buying me out of the company, please. We are sisters." I read the email twice. It was a masterclass in narcissistic deflection. She apologized that Soren misunderstood her cruelty, shifting the blame to a 10-year-old. She did not take ownership of a single action. She just wanted money. I hit reply. I kept it very short. "Vesper, Soren did not misunderstand you. He understood you perfectly. You are a predator who feeds on the weak. You stole from charity. You stole from my son, and you stole from me. My silence over the years was never agreement. It was endurance. And I am done enduring you. Do not ever contact me again. Good luck with the FBI." I hit send, blocked the email address, and permanently deleted the thread. I did not feel a single ounce of guilt. A boundary is not revenge. A boundary is simply the architecture you build to ensure that revenge never becomes necessary again. Over the next year, I completely dismantled the toxic culture of the academy. We dropped the ridiculous elitist etiquette classes and the country club networking events. I rebranded the company, focusing entirely on practical, hands-on educational support for children with learning differences. The first new room we opened was a massive digital workshop where kids could build, code, and test ideas without being graded or judged by how impressive they looked on paper. And as for Soren, the child my sister had deemed not gifted enough, his life was about to change in a way none of us could have ever predicted. A year after the disastrous Gala, the Sterling Foundation held its annual Youth Innovation Showcase. Zinnia, true to her word, had permanently banned my sister from their network. However, after reviewing the actual source code and the developer notes on the educational app, Zinnia had personally reached out to me. The foundation invited Soren to present his project, not for a corporate grant, but as a special honorary exhibition of young talent. I sat in the front row of the massive auditorium. The room was packed with educators, software engineers, and philanthropists. Alistair and Delphine were not there. They had asked to come, but I told them they had not earned the right to sit in the front row of his success after they demanded he hide in the shadows. Soren walked out onto the stage. He was 11 years old now, wearing a comfortable sweater instead of an oversized stiff suit. He walked up to the microphone, pulled it down to his height, and looked out at the massive crowd. He clicked a button, and his wire frames appeared on the massive screen behind him. "Hi, I am Soren," he said, his voice echoing clearly through the room. "I have dyslexia. That means words sometimes look like puzzles I cannot solve. So, I built a game that changes the puzzle." For the next 10 minutes, he confidently explained the mechanics of his application. He answered questions from professional engineers with the casual ease of someone who truly understands his craft. He shined so brightly that it brought tears to my eyes. At the very end of his presentation, a wealthy investor in the second row raised his hand. "Soren, this is incredibly impressive," the man said. "Did you always know this invention would work so perfectly?" Soren smiled, a genuine, easy smile. He looked right at me in the front row. "No," Soren answered. "I just knew that not working yet was not the same thing as having no future. My mom taught me that my value is in my brain, not in being perfect." The auditorium erupted into a massive standing ovation. I had to look away for a moment, wiping my face, overwhelmed by a fierce, protective pride. He had not just survived the cruelty of his family, he had transcended it. He knew exactly who he was. My phone stayed completely quiet in my pocket. The 66 missed calls that had once felt like an approaching, terrifying hurricane had become the ultimate proof of my freedom. Some of my distant relatives still occasionally message me, calling me cold-blooded for pushing my own sister into a federal investigation and ruining her marriage. They say I went too far over a minor insult at a party. So, I leave it to you, the jury of the internet. Did I go too far? Should I have given her a chance to explain herself and keep the company? Let me know your verdict in the comments. Thank you so much for joining me through this story. If you found this satisfying, if you support setting hard boundaries against toxic families, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss another story. Life is full of drama, and I will be here to share it with you. Until next time, stay strong and protect your peace.